How's it going, everyone? Taki here. Today we're going to be taking a look at console mode running on SuperStation One. This is a video that I've been planning to get done for a while, but whenever I planned to do it, we just kept adding more and more features that required more and more testing. But now we're finally at a stage where it's good enough for a developer showcase to give you an idea of what we've been doing behind the scenes. In this video, I'm going to be using this portable monitor, and I would usually be using this in a wireless mode, but it doesn't work well with the screen sitting flat on a table. The back of my SS1 has a yellow power cable, a keyboard adapter, and a Wi-Fi adapter because this version of SuperStation doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi working. I'll disconnect the power cable so we can go through the full boot sequence. Normally, you'd need to press the power button to get this to power on, but this version of SuperStation is an older one, and the power button isn't hooked up correctly right now. The power light is also the wrong color on this version, and it's hooked up to the HPS activity instead of VCC in this version. The menu button works, but it's using the wrong switch, and you have to press it twice to activate it on this version. So just to keep things above board, this is version 1.0 of SS1. There's a version 1.1, which is the retail version, but I don't have that one in my studio right now. This older version works perfectly fine for what we're going to be doing in this video. Anyway, here we are with Mr. FPGA running on SuperStation, again with the portable HDMI monitor. This is my personal SD card that I use on my Mr. Pi, and if you aren't familiar with this UI, this is what runs on Mr. Pi and on the DE10 Nano. When we first set out to release this product, one of the main requests that we got from many customers was to simplify this entire UI or to attempt to make it more user-friendly. There are a limited number of things that you can do in the stock UI to make this easier to use, with favorites being the best thing going. You can put some of your games inside this favorite section here, which makes it easier to run. There's no box art support, but the game will load fully after you select it. This saves you the step of having to open up the core menu, browse the game that you want, go inside a zip folder if it's compressed, and then launch the game itself. A significant number of people asked for an easier way of interacting with Mr. FPGA, so we took that and started developing what we now call console mode. Let's take things back to the start of the year to look at the original concept plans for console mode. I'll point out that these pictures aren't anything new. I've been developing SS1 in public on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram from day one, covering hardware and software work. So if you haven't seen these, you can go ahead and go check that out if you haven't. Here we have our main simplified menu. The philosophy of console mode is that you should be able to do every single thing that the system can do via controller. This is something that is not true about the stock Mr. menu, and it's the main thing that we wanted to fix since SS1 is primarily a console. This menu has 6 items, and we're just going to go through this. Inside the load core option, we have 4 separate system sections with arcade, computer, console, and handheld. If we go inside the handheld section, we have a list of systems that are populated with ROMs. If we go inside a system, it was originally planned that we would have a list view like this with a mode switch to go into a different mode. This is before we had a way of displaying box art on screen, so the entire menu was intended to just be a simple text-based menu. But I created a box art view like this, and I also made a scrolling box art view like this that you'd be able to switch between by pressing a mode switch button. Taking things further, I imagine that you could reuse in-game screenshots that you took for a game, so it would show up as a full screen backdrop to console mode. I also made a box art grid view similar to DuckStation and envisioned that it would support screenshots as well. So that was the original plan. Let's see how things have evolved. And here we are. This is the current version of console mode. We have a couple of things just in this first UI here to go over. We have a profile name in the top corner. This will support different profiles, mainly for some configuration options or themes. Right now, we only have console mode, but I imagine that there will be others in the future. There's a date and time section over here in the corner. This does work if you have your time set. I don't have a battery in my SS1, so this will reset every time I do a reboot. We have your current section that you are in right here in the corner, and then we have a set of button labels on the right. And in the main menu, we have a couple of new options. We have load game, resume game, PS1 disk, other disk, load core, history, favorites, update, and settings. And we're going to go through these one by one, but we will skip over these disk options because I don't have a super dock in my studio right now. It's back at the office right now during a massive typhoon, and those two are better suited for a super dock development video itself. Even though it seems like those two options would be fast to cover, This is where most of the software R&D time went, making this system able to not only read PS1 discs, but also to read just about any system that uses a CD. So I'll do another video on that with the SuperDock. Let's go into Load Game. If we go into the Load Game menu, you can see that we have a set of 4 icons with a small bug on the active selection. Here we have arcade, computer, console, and handheld, and our lower left corner changes in this menu. If I go into the arcade menu, this is how I have it set up right now. There's not really a great way to set up arcade systems because there are so many, but this is the default way. And if I want to play a CPS2 game, all I have to do is go over there and I can see all of the games, and the artwork would be on the right side, but I haven't scraped the system yet. And if we go back, we can go into the computer section. This section would be bigger if I had more computer games, but this is all I have right now. Console is where you're going to get the best look at this UI. I made sure every system in here had artwork for all the games that I had listed. If we punch into Adventure Vision, you can see that I have Space Force, and we have the box art on the right side. I manually grabbed this artwork for this. I'll also note that we have a plan to implement a hotkey to change the active section, but it's not implemented right now. Backing out and going into Atari, we have Pac-Man, and if we select a game, the system is going to automatically load the Atari 2600 core and the Pac-Man game for us. This entire process has a minimal amount of friction. It's certainly a lot better than loading the core, opening the menu, browsing for the game that you want from the list, and then playing it. I think what we have is a lot easier to use and has a lot in common with the favorites menu because we use the Zapperoo API to make all of this possible. The Zapperoo API does a lot of work for us that we didn't need to worry about. Let's go into another section with more games. Here's Genesis, and there's something about box art as it is right now that we can talk about, but before that, let's select a game that has a longer title. Inside the PS1 section, we have this game that is too long to fit on screen, and you'll see that it just scrolls over so you can read the entire thing. We'll probably add an option to just disable some of the added text added onto the file name, like the region or the version code, but we haven't implemented that yet. Now, when it comes to the box art, there's something that's important that I did with this system. I've manually gone ahead and I've scraped this entire system, and I've done that to illustrate the application performance. I'm going to hold down on the keyboard so we can scroll through the entire list. These images aren't preloaded, so you'll be able to see what was supposed to be impossible for yourself. As you can see, it's pretty smooth, but it gets much faster after the picture has been loaded a single time. This is a system that I scraped myself, and I have compressed the artwork to match our CPU performance. If I go into another system where I didn't do this, like Nintendo 64, you'll see the difference with this very demanding N64 game that runs perfectly on SS1. Eventually, we want to make this so the system will boot back into console mode now that we have feature parity with the main UI, but I can just launch it again from the scripts menu. For this particular screen, I'm using a 540p configuration, but 1080p works as well depending on your display. But anyway, doing this test on this section is much slower. These pictures are very high resolution. Some of them are 2K or 3K resolution, and you'll see that it takes a lot longer to load up each individual picture because they aren't optimized for this platform. After you have the list loaded once, it's a breeze to scroll through, but you really want to have your artwork compressed to make this faster. I imagine that we'll have some PC app in the future that will resize and optimize the artwork for this to make it an easier process. It currently works as is, but it's slow if you load this up with high resolution images. So that's basically the gist of the load game section on console mode, and I think it works really well. I do have plans for some other games list views from the original plan that we haven't finished, but we don't need to have that for this first version. I think this is a lot easier to use now than the default Mr. experience. Resume game will just load up the last game that you were actively playing. So if I press on this, the system will keep track of the last game that you load. And in this case, it was playing 1080p snowboarding. We're going to skip over PS1 disc and other disc like I said earlier. The load core menu exists in the default menu, so we put it in here. In this view, you'll see a list of your FPGA cores with support for box art. I don't have any, but it is very easy to get system pictures and put them in this menu just like box art. The history view is a useful feature that doesn't exist in Mr. FPGA. It will show you a list of the last games that you played. Not all of these have artwork, but you get the idea, and it works really well if you tend to just play the same few games, especially if you don't remember what game you were playing last. We also have a favorites list, and you can add more games to it. I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of the games in this list, and then I'll go through the load game menu and just add a couple of games here and there by pressing X. If you're familiar with the normal favorites menu in Mr., this is similar, but it's a lot faster. I'm just going to quickly create a list of games for my kid, and then I'll go back into the favorites menu to see all of them. So this is similar to the Mr. FPGA menu, but it's a lot easier to use, and it has box art support. When it comes to the update menu, This will close out of console mode and it will load the update script. In the future, we plan to delineate between updating console mode itself and updating the main system. I don't have an active internet connection right now, so this doesn't do anything, but it would normally just run the update script. And that brings us to the settings menu, which on its face doesn't seem like a lot, but there's actually a lot that went into this section. And for this to make sense, we're going to go one by one just to show you. So our first option is volume. This is pretty basic. We have 0 to 100%, but how does this look in the main UI? First, we have to press escape. Then, you have to press left, which you wouldn't know by default. And then you can see here we have core volume and we have global volume. And when we're setting that volume in console mode, we're essentially just setting this value. I want to point out that there are some things that don't make a lot of sense in this main UI, and it wasn't until I had to try and get feature parity with the Mr. Menu that a lot of this jumped out to me. For global volume, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 bars, and if you press enter on this, you can also mute. So I'm just going to show with my keyboard that you can adjust this by pressing right or left, but if you want to mute, you can't mute by just continuing to press left as you would expect. You have to press enter on this, and I don't know how you'd find that out on your own. So yeah, we have 8 bars on this, but we use percentages on console mode. Core volume is something different that we didn't try to set, but that can only go down to 2 for some reason without being able to mute, so this entire thing doesn't make a lot of sense. The network option will just show you your active IP address if you're connected to a network, but I don't have a connection right now. We plan to do a bit more work on this in the future. For example, if you want to connect to Wi-Fi, you'd need to go into the script section and then load the Wi-Fi script to scan and connect for Wi-Fi. For example, if you want to connect to Wi-Fi, you need to go into the script section and then load the Wi-Fi script to scan and connect to Wi-Fi. I would like this to be added directly into console mode to cause less friction and to make this easier to use, but right now we haven't had a chance to implement that. We did do a lot of work on the Bluetooth section, and for you to appreciate this, we're going to have to go and check how this process works on the stock menu. When you're in the menu, you can press escape to open up the settings menu, and then you have the system settings and the miscellaneous settings menu. If you want to pair a Bluetooth controller, how do you do that since there's no option for you to select? Well, you actually need a keyboard for this. If you press F11, you can get into this menu, which is actually a good automatic connection menu. It will connect to any controller in range that is pairing, and it works really well. But the problem is that you need to have a keyboard to access this menu, which goes against our philosophy for console mode that everything the system can do should be accessible by a gaming controller, not by a keyboard. Now that I have a controller paired, I can pair another, but I need to have a keyboard every time I want to do this. Let's see how this works on console mode. We can go into the Bluetooth section with controller and pairing mode, and the system will automatically connect to it and show it in the list. That's controller 1 paired. Now we're going to pair the second controller. Both of these now work. Then we have controller 3. And now we have controller 4. This one didn't want to pair, but now we have 4 controllers paired. These are called controller 1, 2, 3, and 4. It doesn't mean player 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you start a core, the first controller to press a button becomes controller 1, and it changes like that all of the time. Anyway, that's how this process works in console mode. You can see the controller name for all of these, which you can't do in the stock UI, and you can see the address, all without needing a keyboard. The color menu is pretty self-explanatory, and this just adds a different feel to this menu. It's easy to change the active color, and I imagine this is going to be tied to the profile option in the future. Right now, it just works by selecting from this menu. This is a nice quality of life improvement to our app. That brings us to the system configuration option. This exists in the main UI, with the main difference being that you can only have 4 config options. We only have 4 now, but we have another version of this that supports 7, which is much better for testing SS1 since we have so many different video output options. The stock menu only has 4, which is not great. Console mode has at least 4, but it can support more. Set time is another simple option that is going to load a script to set the time if you have an internet connection. We'll probably add an option in there to manually adjust this at a later date since SS1 has an RTC. The clear cache option is here when you add more games. It will force the system to rescan all of the directories again when you reload the system, and it will cache all of that data to improve performance. Developer tools is our last big section. In here, we have the show FPS option, which you can turn on or off. We also have a refresh rate option. It isn't too useful at 540p, but it can be at higher resolutions. PS1 Fast Disk is connected to the Super Dock, so we're going to skip over that and go directly to the controls section. But let's first go over this in the main UI. I'll use this controller that was giving me pairing issues. We're going to go into the Define Joystick section menu, and this menu kind of just makes you go through a ton of stuff that you probably don't need to. For example, I don't have a second stick, and I also don't have a button right now that I can use to go forward to skip this. I need to press the user button or space. The controller doesn't have those, so I need to go back to my trusty keyboard. Now we are finally in the menu that we care about, and I can quickly set all of these and some other buttons before hitting a bunch of useless stuff that we have to skip over again. Let's see how that looks in our app. We're going to go back to the developer tools and then go to controls. In here, we're going to go to define joystick buttons, select our USB controller, and then we're presented with a list of the main controller input buttons. In this case, I just want to swap the B and A button. I select the input value I want to remap, and then I press the button that I want to act as that input value. I'll do the same for the other button, and then hit save. Now my file is created, and I didn't need to waste time skipping through all of the other controller remap options. The keyboard remapping is a bit more involved. Let's see how this works on the stock UI. This isn't something that I had to mess around with too much, but I found some issues with it when we were looking to implement this in console mode. If we go into the remap keyboard option, the first thing that you're asked to do is press the key that you want to change. So I'll press page up, and then I'll press page down. So page up will happen whenever I press page down. Now I'll do the opposite and map page down to page up. We now have these two keys flipped. So what's the issue with this? Well, with this way on its face, it seems kind of easy, right? Because you don't have to go through the entire UI to remap a key that you would need like before. But the issue is that you actually need to have the key that you want to remap. In some cases, it's possible that you could have a keyboard that doesn't have every key, and you want to remap a key that you do have for one that you don't. You can imagine that I don't have any of these. If I want page up to activate when I press 1, there's no way that I can map 1 to page up or 2 to page down. Let's see how this works in console mode. We'll go back into developer tools, controls, and then remap keyboard. In this UI, we have a list of every keyboard value and what that key currently does. In this way, I can go into the key that I don't have at all, and then I can remap it to the one that I do have. You have to imagine right now that I don't have the page up key. I'm going to hit enter, and then I will map the new key that I want to act as page up. I didn't need to have page up on my keyboard to be able to do this adjustment. I'll then do the flip of this and then map 1 to page up. Now that I'm done, I'm going to hit save and reboot. And we can verify this change worked by loading up a core with keyboard input. If I press page up, you can see that it acts as the number 1 key. You can see that it works, and I didn't need to have a 1 key to do this, and I could even have a broken 1 key and still be able to do this, which you cannot do with the default remapping way. This is the way that I believe this should work. You can just imagine if you had a smaller keyboard with less keys or without the F keys. You are out of luck with the stock UI versus this new way. Next up, we have the load script option. This is in the normal settings menu already behind one of the settings menu. We didn't change anything. You can access everything in the scripts folder inside this menu. You could even put text here or a graphic for each script to basically say what the script does. For the theme option, you can load different themes. Right now, this is set to console mode, and we only have the console mode theme at this point, but this application does support different themes. This is just the one that we did. That leaves us with language. My primary goal for this is to eventually get this to support many different languages because the Mystery UI only supports English. Obviously, we all know English is not the only language used throughout the world, so I eventually want this to have other languages supported. This is on the back burner for now because it's going to be a bit more work to get this done. That's kind of it for all of the current functions, but SS1 has a lot of analog inputs, and we wanted to make sure this UI could run on a CRT. This is how it looks on a CRT. There's still a lot of work to be done, and not every CRT is going to look like this because some have different resolutions that they support. As you can see, everything can work. We can go into the games directory and we have box art. It's a little squished due to the way that this system scales the frame buffer at these lower resolutions. If I press the underscan button, you can get a better idea of what's going on here. This just requires a bit more work to fine tune the scaling, but it's at least functional on this and it works well. But yeah, that's going to wrap up things for this in-depth look at console mode. This took a lot of work to do, and obviously there's a ton of work inside these SuperDock sections that we didn't even cover in this video, but this should hopefully be a good first look for every person that requested us to do this. We would not have done all of this work if so many people weren't asking us to make this system more user-friendly. And I think we've pretty much nailed it in terms of making this system as easy to use as possible. If you have some other features that you'd like to see, you can leave us suggestions on this video. We're pretty much just going from customer feedback at this point. We are primarily a hardware company, and doing months of R&D on software is a big risk when we can only generate revenue from selling hardware. but there are still some things that we could do, and I want to make sure that we're doing things that customers want to see versus just things that I think would be useful. So again, we welcome your suggestions. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.